Ah, the smiling friends. These guys work hard to make their clients smile, but their lawyers would have to work even harder to get them off the hook for all the crimes they've committed. And that's not even to mention those clients themselves, so today we're sentencing smiling friends characters for their crimes. If you think we're exaggerating, I can think of no character better to start with than Pim. You'll probably look at Pim and think, he's way too nice to have anything more than a few misdemeanors on his record from his and Charlie's misadventures. And you'd be right, for the most part. When Pim is in the right headspace, he's totally a stand-up guy. On the other hand, if you run into him when he's jealous of his friends stealing his dream to become a hero in the Enchanted Forest, you'll find that he's capable of some shady stuff.
What's going on here? Charlie knows how much I love the Enchanted Forest.
He attempts grand theft against Mip in his sleep, trying to steal his handmade gift for the princess. In the process, he also ends up accidentally killing Mip, which tacks on a charge of involuntary manslaughter. I wonder what's weirder, the fact that we're starting this video off with a guy who's killed somebody, or the fact that the guy in question is Pim? The answer is neither, because the real weirdest factor is that this isn't Pim's only kill. In, The Boss Finds Love, Pim, alongside Charlie and Allan, conspires to kill the boss's wife. That said, they did have evidence that said wife was the daughter of Satan, who was brainwashing Mr. Boss and intending on stealing his life force and company.
Hello, boys.
So we'd have to count that as self-defense. In the same category, we're going to also pardon Pim, and Charlie by extension, from any crimes they committed while on board the frat boy alien ship, since they were abducted and really just trying to survive. Of course, there's also the fact that they withhold the information that the Earth is, in fact, flat in the Smiling Friends universe.
This can't be real.
I need to sit down.
This can't...
Pim, we need to take this to the grave. We cannot tell anybody.
But while that's probably not a crime in the legal sense, it still feels kind of wrong. Sentence. While he always means well, Pim has definitely committed his fair share of atrocities, and when he goes off the deep end, he falls hard. He's lucky that the guy he inadvertently killed was a stalker, but that event showed that he definitely has an unstable side and might need more help than he lets on. We're going to sentence him to 6 months in jail and a mandatory visit from the Smiling Friends. Seriously, someone needs to make sure Pim is able to smile and relax for a while so we don't have another Enchanted Forest debacle. But on an emotional and criminal level, where would Pim be without his best friend Charlie? For starters, Charlie has at least one charge of public disturbance under his belt. When he's drunkenly befriending Jimble, the utterly unworthy replacement of Smormu, he shows off his new knife to Pim, making his friend clearly uncomfortable. Of course, Pim probably wouldn't... Okay, no, he definitely wouldn't press charges on Charlie for something so minuscule, so neither will we. Unfortunately, we can't be quite as forgiving when it comes to Charlie's killing of an endangered species. In the Enchanted Forest episode, Charlie kills a dragon as Mip sings of his heroic deeds, and it's pretty safe to assume that dragons are an endangered species. It'd be one thing if the dragon attacked Charlie first, but he's just chilling there in his cave. Seems like a non-issue to me personally. Sentence. Surprisingly, Charlie's sentence will be even lighter than Pim's. As we mentioned earlier, we can't charge the guy for hijacking an alien spaceship nor even destroying a planet, since both were done under the threat of kidnapping and eternal torment, respectively. All we can really charge him for is killing a probably endangered dragon and causing the occasional public disturbance. So we're gonna sentence Charlie to 3 months in jail and a fine of $10,000. Something's gotta change indeed, brother. I bet you're wondering when we're gonna get to the real criminals then, right? I mean, yeah, we're getting to that. Get out of my head, man, get out of my head! DJ Spit is one of the most memorable gag characters in the series so far, with one of the funniest vocal performances and, relevant to today's video, one of the most egregious lists of crimes.
Hey, wait a minute, man. They don't think nothing matters at all, man.
I'm not sure how the laws in Crimeville work, but even by their standards, DJ Spit seems pretty darn shady. His very first crime is aggravated assault, as seen when he's convinced Pim and Charlie are trying to get in his head after mistaking them for the Frowning Friends. Come on, dude, that's a totally different shade of purple. He points a gun at the pair, and given how quick he was to do it, it's safe to assume he's done this before.
Nobody's messing with your head. Get out of my head! No, nobody's messing with your head, man. Nobody's messing with your head.
But that's not nearly as interesting as it gets. In the episode, A Allan Adventure, this musical icon is guilty of grand theft. Not only does he steal Allan's box of paper clips, but he steals a helicopter as well. I know that's nowhere near as severe as stealing the box of paper clips, but still. Oh yeah, there's also this tiny detail of him shooting at the US Air Force, which reveals that he not only owns a machine gun, which is illegal in most states, but also definitely counts as treason and attempted murder. All of that isn't even taking into account the high likelihood of illegal drug use. Granted, we don't have confirmation on that one, but come on, they don't have to spell everything out for us, right?
What the man, that makes me angry, man.
Sentence. Look, if nothing else, we can at least see that DJ Spit isn't quite right in the head. What's more, later in the Allan episode, it's revealed that the landlord planned out every aspect of Allan's day, which means that the clearly poor, drug-addicted DJ was just doing his job, man. That doesn't excuse his crimes, but it does mean that there's someone who holds greater responsibility than him for them. And I mean, the guy isn't all bad. He was nice enough to buckle up the stolen paper clips before he took off, right? Still, we can't let him off the hook. We're gonna have to sentence DJ Spit to 15 years in a psychiatric hospital and a mandatory apology SoundCloud album. Like, I don't know, all aboard the toxic gossip helicopter, man, or something like that. Can't wait for that to drop. And since we already mentioned him, we can't possibly avoid the landlord. And, oh boy, this guy's gonna be a doozy, isn't he? Okay, all the man wanted was to smoke weed, fill his and Allan's bellies with diet soda, and play Burnout Revenge for the PS2. First of all, I hate being the one to enforce this, but smoking weed is illegal in Pennsylvania at the time of writing this video. But thankfully, I don't think the diet soda nor Burnout Revenge for the PS2 are controlled substances, so he can at least enjoy 2 out of 3. But now we move on to his unnecessarily elaborate plan. First, to recap, every aspect of Allan's day was planned out by the landlord, meaning we have to take every crime committed against him into account. First was the obvious hiring of DJ Spit, which could definitely count as aiding and abetting his little episode of treason. He's also guilty of defiling corpses, since he manages to send a crew of skeleton pirates after Allan. Once Allan arrives and the landlord is able to set his plan into motion, he reveals that he has a bomb strapped to his chest that will explode in 3 seconds unless you take a bath. Oh, sorry, wrong show. But the crime still stands, since this is an attempted mass murder, terroristic threat, and blackmail charge all rolled up into one. Sentence. Mr. Landlord here has one defense, and that's the vague possibility of an insanity plea.
I was just wondering if you wanted to hang out with me and smoke weed and fill our bellies with diet soda and play Burnout Revenge for the PS2.
I mean, even dying wasn't enough to stop this guy, and he's confirmed that he's going to come after Allan again. But insane or not, the landlord is calculating and ruthless when it comes to achieving his desires, which means our only possible solution is to sentence Mr. Landlord to life in a psychiatric hospital. He'll be able to play all the Burnout Revenge he wants to, just far away from the vast majority of society. Maybe DJ Spit and him could make a YouTube channel together. I feel like they'd get along. With a mighty ooh, Gwimbly is next. A cult classic video game icon, Gwimbly Hernandez is a pretty chill guy. He's the type of guy who will do his iconic Gwimbly victory dance for free twice.
Okay, I guess I can do one more for nothing. Ew, ew, ew.
Before charging you $5 on Venmo. That said, he's also the type of guy who will trespass onto your property when he's down on his luck. But Smiling Friends is a charity and the guy probably just needed help, so we're not going to give him too much grief for that. We will, however, give him some for his terroristic threats. When the CEO insults him upon his return to the company, he lunges at him with a threat of gun violence. If he'd had his Gwimbly gun on him, it's not too crazy to assume that he might have committed a felony here. Sentence. While he might not have actually ended up hurting anybody, Gwimbly still showed that he's a little bit unstable and a threat of gun violence isn't particularly light. But we're sympathetic to the plight of the homeless, so we're going to sentence Gwimbly to no more than a $500 fine and mandatory Gwimbly gun safety classes. I'm not sure he's going to teach the Gwimbly gun safety classes, but oh wait, I just had a great idea. Let's move from Gwimbly to his greatest nemesis, who isn't a video game boss fight. The CEO may look like your average blob of grease and self-degradation, but he's much more than that, by which we mean he's worse. Since the CEO technically owns the rights to Gwimbly as a franchise, he might be within his rights to keep the Smiling Friends from making their own Gwindy game.
And destroy them.
Yes, master.
But he definitely doesn't have the right to attempted murder on Gwimbly, Pim, and Allan. He also forces his employee to help him out, aka do all the work himself, while using his face as a chicken nugget dipping tray, which has to count as 2 different kinds of workers' rights violations, honestly. Sentence. The CEO has proved through his actions that he is completely unfit to run a company. Attempting to kill someone for making an indie game isn't okay, which really isn't something I should have to clarify. His disregard for his employees, both new and old, convinces us that the CEO needs to be sentenced to 20 years in prison and loss of rights to the Gwimbly property. And to piggyback off the last entry, he'll also need to teach the Gwimbly gun safety class. Next, we have the lean, mean, opposite side on the color wheel from green, Allan. The socially awkward, cheese-loving icon himself has more than his fair share of misdeeds.
I will get you. Nobody takes Allan's precious piece of cheese and gets away with it.
But does he really? If we looked at Allan's deeds in A Allan Adventure, we could charge him with multiple accounts of breaking and entering, theft, and even attacking an endangered species of fish. But all of that was put together by the landlord, and his job was literally to get his boss a box of paper clips, which means he isn't really guilty of any criminal wrongdoing. The guy's just super unlucky.
Where are my paper clips?
If you're worried that means he's innocent, worry no more. In the Gwimbly episode, he not only assaults a homeless man, Gwimbly, with dirty brown water, but later in the episode, he straight up murders someone. I guess the Bliblies really tarnished Allan's view on short people, but startled or not, you don't just kick a creature whose body is as big as your foot with full force like that.
See ya, we'll see you now.
What? She startled me.
Oh, and speaking of the Bliblies, in the first episode, we can't forget about that little nom on Charlie's nose, which the latter later reveals made him uncomfortable.
I don't know if you remember this or not, but the last time we hung out, like you and I, you actually sucked on my nose, so.
What? I don't remember doing that.
Since he just spent the better part of the day being crucified, we can't fault him for not being in the right headspace, but that still counts as workplace harassment, even if it's very unlikely that Charlie would press charges about that, since he was more than willing to talk it out. Sentence. As understanding of mental states as we like to be here, murder is still murder. Self-defense is one thing, but I don't think startling counts as an attack, especially given how much time he had to react. I guess we don't know if she's dead, but at the very least, we're gonna have to sentence Allan to 10 years in prison and mandatory anger management classes. Without further ado, it's time to get to the iconic Green Man himself. That's right, we're talking about this guy. I know what you're thinking. First off, who is this guy? And second, why is he worth mentioning? Well, if you don't recognize him, this is the dude who ate a piece of shrimp's skin at the tanning salon.
Cooked shrimp.
That's gotta count as both assault and cannibalism. Maybe they're technically a different species, but it's still cannibalistic. Later, when he reappears in the season 2 finale, he commits involuntary manslaughter when he accidentally knocks over the cooler holding Rotten the Snowman. Sentence. This guy is an absolute menace. So ruthless, in fact, that the show itself hasn't yet dared to utter his name. We're gonna have to sentence him to 20 years in federal prison for not only the gravity of his actions, but the sheer lack of remorse he holds for any of them. But now let's get to the real king of Green Smiling Friends characters, Glep. It probably won't surprise you to find that Glep is by far the most chill of the Smiling Friends when it comes to his criminal activities. He's a family man, a devoted Kristijan, and a future president of the United States, but even he's got his sketchier moments. The main crime we can attribute to him is misdemeanor assault, given his tendency to spit on people when he's upset. Like when Rex insulted him before he was even able to do his audition for Mr. Frog's replacement. Aside from the occasional spitting, the worst of Glep comes out when he's placed in a position of power. When he briefly joins the Frowning Friends, he kicks Charlie in the shin for seemingly no reason, even though Charlie is already detained, which definitely counts as another assault charge. Really makes you wonder if he's really the best presidential candidate. Not me though, I'm still voting for him. Sentence. Glep can get up to some hijinks here and there, but he's still a relatively chill guy who just does his own thing. He's also shown to be very cooperative with authority figures. We see this when he helps tend Brittany's garden, despite the fact that, as everyone knows, Glep hates gardening. We have to assume he'd be cooperative with any legal forces coming after him too, so we'll just sentence Glep to a $50 fine and a government-appointed bucket to stop him from constantly spitting. From one unintelligible politician to another, next is former President Jimble.
Hello, Transylvania!
Jimble is a bit young compared to the usual US presidential candidate, and his naivete reflects that quite well. For starters, when he announces that he plans to be the money president, promising everybody $2 billion each, he has to immediately backtrack when Pim points out that, obviously, this will crash the economy, to say the least.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Everybody's gonna have to give back all that money to the government.
This causes mass panic and chaos among the USA, so we'll have to charge Jimble with creating a panic here. Much more infamously, however, was when he announced Mr. Blingo, Prime Minister of Blingostan, as an eternal ally to the United States, thereby becoming an accomplice to his deeds, which, of course, included wiping out an entire race of people. We'll call this crime accomplice to international terrorism, because even doing that by accident shows that you're pretty darn dangerous. Sentence. Jimble is an interesting case in that none of his crimes were committed with any bad intentions. It just turns out that their consequences were really bad. Since he lost the election, we don't have to worry about impeaching him or anything, but given how horrific the results of his crimes were, we have to sentence Jimble to 20 years in federal prison and $1 million in fines as reparations for the Blingostan people. Hopefully they serve lamb in jail. From the great big flat earth to the stars above, next we have the aliens from Charlie, Pim, and Bill versus the alien.
There! Oh, wait, sorry. That was just a satellite from earlier.
These guys started off strong with their criminal records by kidnapping Pim, Charlie, and, worst of all, Bill. Everyone's favorite character, Bill, was kidnapped, and worse still, he was murdered by the aliens, and he also had his corpse desecrated by them. Now, I guess you could maybe defend these crimes by saying that the aliens are, well, aliens. I'm not gonna defend them for killing Bill, personally, but you're more than welcome to. To these guys, eating humans might be what eating meat is to us. Sadly for them, though, that doesn't excuse them for forcing Charlie and Pim to blow up an entire planet under threat of eternal torment, which counts as blackmail and psychological terrorism on top of everything else. Sentence. These guys are just absolute menaces.
Alright, can you please just take us home now?
As long as they're around, their victims won't have any sense of peace, so we're going to have to sentence them to eternal exile to another dimension. If you guys want to party 24/7 and force people to shove CD holders up their butts, go right ahead. Just do it far away from our beautifully flat planet. Next up is perhaps the most iconic Smiling Friends client to date, Mr. Frog. While he's definitely one of the funniest characters in the series, Mr. Frog is also one of the most absolutely depraved individuals we've seen so far. First of all, he was cancelled for voring a TMZ reporter for 7 minutes without consent, which counts as assault and led to grave emotional distress on the latter's end. But this isn't anywhere near the worst thing he's even done. There's his habit of using illegal drugs, assuming this lean-flavored Kool-Aid stuff is illegal, which I think is a very reasonable assumption, mind you. his personal zoo full of endangered species like dolphins, which counts as both animal cruelty and killing an endangered species, a charge of hate speech for whatever unspeakable things he said on Jimmy Fallon's show, and at the end of the episode, the cannibalistic murder of his former boss, Rex. This is already more than enough to give Mr. Frog multiple life sentences, but we still aren't even done. Mr. Frog's presidential campaign ad showed him committing even more crimes, including burglary, vandalism, infanticide, toxic waste dumping, domestic terrorism, and first-degree murder on live television. Mr. Frog commits crimes like it's the most natural thing in the world for him, and now that he's the president, there's no telling what atrocities he might commit next. Sentence. Mr. Frog's crimes have earned him a pretty infamous reputation. President or not, this guy just can't be allowed free reign. But this is a free country, and they chose their president, so we've got the perfect solution. Mr. Frog will be quarantined to the White House and fined $1 billion for the various trauma and destruction he's caused. After his term, he'll be sentenced to 47 life sentences, one for each season he's been on the air so far. But we'll let that Mr. Frog show keep going live from prison. Maybe that's just the shake-up the series needs.
I'm Mr. Bug. This is my show. I ate the bug. I ate the bug.
Nearing the end of the list is James. Okay, wow, this guy, huh? This guy. James's first few moments on screen show him vandalizing the Smiling Friends' building, given how he rips the placard off the wall to convince Charlie to basically become his maid for the day. While there, he destroys property, which is pretty bad already, and made even worse by the fact that it's charity property.
And guess what? It takes a lot to make me smile.
But of course, James's worst crimes are the ones that result in him directly hurting others. He not only threatens to kill Charlie, but in one scene he straight up rips his nose off his face, which counts as dismemberment. Finally, at the end of the episode, he murders the CEO, but it's unclear whether or not we should really charge him for that. On one hand, the CEO was trying to kill Gwimbly, Pym, and Allan.
Who's the fat, ugly nerd?
But on the other hand, he wasn't really provoking James until James insulted him, so we don't have much of a case for calling this self-defense. That's not to mention that killing the CEO was what finally made him smile and to leave Charlie alone. Sentence. Frankly, James should receive the death penalty, or at least a life in prison. But that post-credits scene revealed that deep down, he actually does have a heart and regrets pushing Charlie away. Maybe James just needs to find a purpose in life, a purpose far, far away from normal society. So we've got a special kind of life sentence for him. We sentence James to a lifetime as DLC for Gwimbly's game. He could be one of those cool bosses in the story mode of platform fighters. It'd let him get his violence out and, more importantly, keep him away from innocent people and charities to take advantage of. Mip is the formerly living proof that you can't always trust people you've just met. He may seem like a totally nice guy on the surface, but beneath that facade is an absolute menace. First and foremost, Mip is guilty of stalking the princess, causing her to live in a state of constant fear and paranoia. Most recently, his stalking was paired with a clear intent to kill, so we'll add attempted murder to his record. Perhaps the only thing worse than Mip's plan, though, is how he plans to do it. He psychologically manipulates Charlie and Pym to do his dirty work for him, allowing them to hand-deliver his homemade bomb to the princess. He goes as far as to seduce Charlie as he recruits him for the task.
Well, maybe I like that.
Not only would this count as high treason since Mip is conspiring to murder a literal princess, but it also works as an attempted double homicide since he would have blown up Charlie and Pym in the process. To make all this worse, Mip also poisoned Charlie with the headache potion earlier on in the episode. Not only is that psychopathic behavior, but it was totally counterproductive since Charlie ended up being integral to his scheme. Frickin' idiot. Sentence. Mip might honestly be the most irredeemable villain in the series so far. Others either had redeeming qualities or were legitimately too crazy or far gone to realize how bad their actions were. Mip, however, he was calculating, cool-headed, and extremely manipulative, not to mention fully ready to kill his love interest and two people he expressed to consider friends.
Cheer up the princess. Our job is to make people smile.
The princess? How queer. I'm on a quest to the princess myself.
There's only one place for a guy like Mip, and it's not a very enchanted one. We sentence Mip to hell with Jeremy, his only form of hellish entertainment. I guess he already died, so physical punishment wouldn't be the priority, but let's see how you like getting followed and harassed everywhere you go, Mip. Dude, I warned you. Ooh. For our final character today, we have the legend himself, Mr. Boss. Mr. Boss may be a great boss and even a pretty good dad, but he has more than his fair share of criminal activities. The first noteworthy offense occurs in the Halloween episode, where he participates in desecrating the corpse of that blackface demon. We'll probably pardon him for that, since the forced demon fully intended to murder Pym and probably everyone else at the party too. That's on top of being a self-hating racist as well. But on to the crimes that he can actually be charged for. Mr. Boss has multiple counts of attempted murder under his belt. In Frowning Friends, he breaks and enters the Frowning Friends' building, where he nonchalantly tells a terrified Grim that he's just gonna shoot him in the head and kill him.
Relax, man. I was just gonna shoot you in the head and kill you.
Later on in Mr. President, he goes out to take matters into his own hands when Mr. Frog is elected president. end, and while it's unclear what this means, it definitely wasn't anything overly friendly. Finally, we have to move on to his large role in the Tyler Gets Fired episode. Charlie discovers a manifesto in his desk, which definitely suggests some kind of conspiracy, but for all we know, it could be a totally well-intentioned plan for society. Who knows? Finally, there's one count of sexual harassment against Oscar and Spamtopia. That's a pretty loose description of it, given that Oscar just got done trying to kill Pim and Mr. Boss, but if we mentioned Allan nomming on Charlie's nose, we can definitely bring up a stolen kiss from Mr. Boss. Oscar, you lucky son of a sentence. Mr. Boss does have one overarching factor in his defense: insanity. This guy doesn't have an insanity plea, he has an insanity nonchalant statement. Despite multiple attempted felonies, his general decency towards family and friends portrays him as a pretty nice guy. Heck, after the frowning friends are no longer a threat to his business, he offers them some consolation and encourages them because their plan was so good it drove him crazy. We can't totally let him off the hook, but given how altruistic he and his company usually are, we'll just sentence Mr. Boss to 5 years in prison, followed by 10 years of psychiatric care and observation.
Whew! What a crazy day, huh, Pim?
He's not a bad guy, he just needs help, like a lot of help. But someone's gotta make sure the good people of Pennsylvania are smiling, so as long as there's someone to keep him from going off the deep end again, we think he'll be just fine.